Kabir was the great poet, saint, and weaver of medieval India. A God-intoxicated man, his teaching words and poems have become the best known and oft recited of any throughout all of India. According to legend, Kabir was born of a virgin from a Muslim mother. He grew up in the community of the Julaha, or the weaving caste of the great city of Benares. As he matured, he showed strong spiritual tendencies, and he sought as his guru the great Hindu Brahmin teacher Ramanand. Kabir knew that Ramanand would not give initiation to him, a Muslim. He also knew that every morning before dawn, Ramanand would descend the stone steps of the Ghats to bathe in the holy river Ganges. So Kabir lay down on these steps in the dark and was trod upon by Ramanand, who exclaimed, "Ram," a name of God. Kabir took this as his initiation, the name of God from the lips of his guru. Like the Buddha, like Jesus, Kabir judged a man by his realization and love, not by his caste or wealth. When both Hindus and Muslims claimed him as their own, he stood free of both. Kabir disdained the show of pundits and Brahmins, of mullahs and royalty. He criticized the false mummery of the sadhus, ascetics, and fakirs, both Hindu and Muslim. He called them the thugs of Benares. The yogi dyes his garments instead of dyeing his mind in the colors of love. He sits within the temple of the Lord, leaving the all-pervading to worship a stone. He pierces holes in his ears. He has a great beard and matted locks. He looks like a goat. He goes forth into the wilderness, killing all his desires, and turns himself into a eunuch. He reads the Gita and becomes a mighty talker. Kabir says, "You are going to the doors of death, bound hand and foot." Kabir did not hesitate to criticize the priestly classes, both Hindu and Muslim, and they developed a strong disdain for him. Even in Benares, he questioned the sanctity of the holy river Ganges. Kabir said, "If bathing in its holy waters ensures salvation, then every fish is in heaven." For a great while, the king of Benares had wanted Kabir to come and see his grand home, which stands even today on the other side of the Ganges. When Kabir had finally come across the river and been given a tour of the vast palace, the king asked him his opinion of what he had seen. Kabir said that there were two defects which could not be remedied. "What are they?" said the king. "I will have them fixed no matter what the cost." "You cannot remedy them," said Kabir. "One is that this palace will grow old and decay. The second is that you will grow old and die." During the life of Kabir, India was ruled by Muslims. The Emperor Sikandar Lodi came to Benares and, hearing about Kabir, requested of the local Hindu king to bring him for an audience. Although Kabir did not wish to go, the king begged him for his own sake. Kabir consented and appeared before the Muslim emperor. Upon being presented, Kabir gave a greeting that one common man would give to another, looking the emperor directly in the eyes. And Sikandar Lodi grew angry. "Have you no respect for your emperor?" he thundered. He instructed his guards to bind Kabir in chains and to throw him into the river. As soon as he touched the Ganges, his chains burst, and he floated upon the waters in meditation. Some stories say that the emperor then had him burned in fire and tried to get an elephant to trample him. In each instance, Kabir survived untouched. Finally, the emperor, realizing that Kabir was a true holy man and protected by God, threw himself on the ground and begged forgiveness. What is the point of putting bricks and stones together to raise a minaret for the mullah to shout the call for prayer? Has God become hard of hearing? And why bother about the mighty, the famous, or the rich? They are no better than the date palm, which casts a very small shade for the weary traveler, and its fruit is far beyond reach. Kabir left Benares and traveled throughout India for many years. In Gujarat, he met the two brothers Tattva and Jiva, who were observing a severe spiritual penance. In their courtyard was the shriveled branch of a banyan tree. They claimed that they would accept as their guru only that person who could restore that branch to life. After all, that would be a minor miracle for one who could lead the way to God. Kabir visited their village and uprooted that branch, blessing it with a lush and lively growth of leaves, and then replanted it. That replanted branch became a banyan tree and is known today as Kabir Vad. Looked after by the government of Gujarat, this single tree now fills over 3 acres. My friend, hope for the guest while you are alive. Jump into experience while you are alive. Think and think while you are alive. If you don't break your ropes while you're alive, do you think ghosts will do it after you die? The idea that the soul will join with the ecstatic just because the body is rotten, that is all fantasy. What is found now is found then. If you find nothing now, you will simply end up with an apartment in the city of death. But if you make love with the divine now, in the next life you will have the face of satisfied desire. So plunge into the truth. Find out who the great teacher is. Kabir says this: when the guest is being searched for, it is the intensity of the longing for the guest that does all the work. Look at me, and you will see a slave of that intensity. The world of the weaver and the philosophical thought of India are intimately tied. It has been said that the whole of Indian philosophy is reflected in the simple manipulation of the warp and weft of the loom. From the world of the weaver come words like sutra, thread, granta, knot, or tantra, weaving. O weaver, weave the name of God, on whom the gods, men, and sages meditate. To secure the warp, there is a post, and the 4 Vedas are the spinning wheels. God made the 3 worlds into a loom, and he spread the light of knowledge in all directions. The eternal Lord sits on the weaver's seat, and Kabir is merged into his light. From the first time I heard him, I loved the poetry of Kabir. I had come to Benares to pour the ashes of my parents into the Ganges, and while there felt a desire to see the place where Kabir had lived, worked, and taught. Although I had read much of his poetry and teachings, I had never seen the world of the Muslim weavers from which he came. So after much inquiry of where this might be, I was passed from one guide to the next, and finally taken to the weavers' workshops in the Muslim quarter, an area set back from the river like a small ghetto. I walked down the narrow and dirty alleys. There were children playing amidst broken down houses, crumbling bricks, broken steps, littered with dirt, trash, cows and cow dung, goats, dirty water, and general debris. Often too narrow to pass except by turning sideways. These are the roads and passages of an ancient city's culture. As I passed through the alleys, people were surprised to see me, a white man, in their neighborhood. It seemed that few ever visited this area. I looked through the small, low doorways into small rooms with dirt floors, all of them lit only by the little sunlight that passed through the narrow alleys and through the always open windows. This was a unique and beautiful world. This was the world of the Julaha, the always poor and ancient weaving caste of Muslims, responsible for Benares being the premier source of silks throughout the world for centuries. And it is these very same Julahas that were the community in which Kabir lived and worked. Fronting the alleys, one after another, were the weaving workshops filled with activity. Although the streets were dirty, the rooms for weaving, although primitive, were extraordinarily clean. The floors were of highly compacted dirt, and as a sign of respect and care, everyone took off their shoes when entering. In front of each loom was constructed a single pit or rectangular hole dug into the floor. There the weaver sat, on the floor, on a simple folded piece of cloth, his bare feet working the bamboo petals set down below in the hole, which in turn raised and lowered the warp and weft of his loom. Hanging above the loom are 100-yard-long ribbons of stiff wooden cards, each of them with a varying pattern of holes punched through it. As the weaver throws his shuttle back and forth, his feet working the petals, the ribbons move slowly, one by one, through a reader that translates these punched holes into a pattern of woven material. This is where the saying, "It is in the cards," comes from. Although the weaver seems to be in control of what pattern is being produced, really, it's in the cards. Says Kabir, "What good deed can you do if God comes not to your aid? Since every branch you step upon yields and gives way, nothing is really done by you. All that has been done is not yours. For if you had done anything, then there would be another Creator." The process of setting up the loom, of connecting the loop of the cards to the reader to the individual threads that lift and lower each single thread of the warp and weft, is a very time-consuming process. When the loom is set up, it becomes a thing of beauty in itself. I saw how the time goes by, and the sun shifts from one window to another as the day passes, sometimes pouring in on a particularly beautiful color of silk, spread out with its individual threads sparkling in the light, sometimes illuminating the dirt floor, still radiant. The weaver would pass his shuttle, called a nar, a small torpedo-shaped piece of polished buffalo horn, in which a spindle of thread had been inserted. Back and forth, right to left and left to right, he throws the shuttle quickly, and then pulls a wooden bar in front of him to compress the weaving, and then repeats the process again. There was another process of weaving a pattern into the silken cloth with gold spun thread, a process that Benares is famous for. It would involve the weaver with up to 36 different little spools spread out before him. In addition to passing the main shuttle back and forth and then pulling the beam back that would compress what had just been woven more tightly. But in this process, he would also depress the petals again and would weave section by section, and depending on the pattern, one by one, with various colored silken gold-plated threads in and out of the warp and weft in front of him. After he had done that all the way down the line of the cloth, about 10 to 20 times, he would then again pass the main shuttle back and forth 2 times, compress what had just been done, and then again pass the smaller shuttles of colored silks in and out and back and forth. It was immensely time-consuming. I often saw young men doing this work with what looked like their younger brother, or at least a younger boy, one working on one side of the woven silk and one on the other. It seemed that this was the younger boy's apprenticeship, and I always saw them work with great concentration and focus. So much is involved in making a woven piece of cloth. First, there is the spinning of the sutra, the thread, a process most often done by women with delicate and sensitive fingers. Then there is the combing and laying out of the long threads to make ready for the dyeing, a highly sophisticated process in itself. Kabir often spoke of the silk dyeing process. He considered it a metaphor of the divine, claiming that God had dyed everything in His color, and that color was all Kabir saw. Sudden and beautiful bursts of color would appear on the streets of Benares as young Muslim men would prepare the parallel threads of silk over 100 yards long, stretched out beside the busy, honking, noisy streets that would be then wound up onto the cylinders, which would fit into the loom and then give forth again the woven warp and weft. Having wound the silk up on the cylinder, they would disappear. After many of the silks were woven, they were then embroidered. Seated on the dirt floors, mostly young men, bent over the silk cloth, stretched tightly within a wooden loom, and using a single needle, embroidered delicate and intricate patterns, sometimes including small beads or pearls. It was slow work and needed great attention. Patterns were made by Xeroxing a page out of a book, and then punching tiny holes with a needle into the Xeroxed paper. Then, laying the punched-out paper onto the silk, they dusted the sheet with white chalk. Upon removing the paper, there was a faint white outline upon the silk, which they then embroidered upon. I asked one of them how long it took to do a single skirt, one of the projects they were working on, and he replied it took about 4 people, 4 days to complete it. The Julaha have always been poor, exploited like beasts of burden by the middlemen or Majahan. They have always had plenty of work, but for very little pay, so they need to keep working. When they look up from their looms into the alleys, far worse situations abound all around them. In recent times, the introduction of electric machine looms, as well as less expensive silk from China, threatens to dramatically disturb the centuries-old life and community of the Julaha. Technology has come like a Trojan horse within the traditional walls of theirs and many other artisans and craftsmen all over India and the world. Like fish in a lake that has almost dried up, what can they do but continue until it is all gone? It was so beautiful to see the pride and enthusiasm the weavers exhibited when I showed interest in them and their work. Perhaps technology will assist them in bringing their beautiful textiles directly to a larger and appreciative world. Or perhaps technology will snuff them out as outmoded and unnecessary. Or perhaps it's in the cards. Kabir was a weaver in Benares. He wove together the contradictions of this world in a cloth that has served many. embroidered with the threads of his time and place. The beautiful work of his life shines clearly even today. There is nothing but water in the holy pools. I know I have been swimming in them. All the gods sculpted of wood or ivory can't say a word. I know I have been crying out to them. The sacred books of the East are nothing but words. I looked through their covers one day, sideways. What Kabir talks about is only what he has lived through. If you have not lived through something, it is not true. Although he had lived almost his whole life in Benares, Kabir purposefully journeyed to the town of Maghar, about 175 miles away, to spend his final days. It was widely believed that to die in Benares is to be liberated, while to die in Maghar was a great curse, and that you would be born as a donkey in your next life. Kabir said, "What difference is there between Benares and Maghar, if God be in the heart?" At the age of 120 years, Kabir died in Maghar. Both the Hindus and Muslims wanted his remains. The Muslims to bury them and erect a shrine, the Hindus to cremate them. After arguing for hours, a vision of Kabir appeared to them, telling them to remove the shroud from his corpse. When they did so, there was no body to be seen, only a pile of flowers. The Muslims buried their half, and the Hindus burned theirs. Lord, I weave the cloth of thy name. The fruitless toil of weaving for the world has come to an end. I have attained the dazzling state of bliss. Free from fear, free from pain, I am the weaver, O Lord, of thy name. I weave and reap the profit of inner rapport with thee. I am the weaver of the Lord's name.